السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن ولا وبعد. I want to welcome everybody, inshallah ta'ala, to that has joined us for this event. And right before we do start, welcome. Inshallah, I pray that the next hour and a half to 2 hours is an educational program for you, an eye-opening program for you, and a program that you would be able to take the knowledge from and implement throughout the coming years of your life, inshallah. Right before we do delve into our program, I would like to request our Sheikh Ismail to recite a few verses, inshallah, because we do not start a program except with the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tafaddal, Sheikh.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهوى أن تعدلوا وإن تلووا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakumullahu khairan, Sheikh Ismail. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and continue to have you with us in these programs, inshaAllah ta'ala. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and just introduce the program, inshaAllah. So the program is titled, Why do Black Lives Matter to Muslims? And inshaAllah ta'ala, throughout this program, we're going to be delving into a lot of the questions that the Muslim Ummah has, the Muslims have, but they might be asking, they might not be asking, any of the concerns they might have, any of the comments that they might have, and we're going to ask three big powerhouses, inshaAllah ta'ala, to address them. And so just want to take a little bit to introduce the speakers. Number one, we have with us Imam Khalid Griggs. Imam Khalid Griggs is the Imam of the Community Mosque of Winston-Salem, Associate Chaplain for Muslim Life at Wake University, Vice President of the Islamic Circle of North America, member of the Central Shura of Islamic Circle of North America, Board and Chairman of ICNA Council for Social Justice. He is a founding member of Muslims for Social Justice, member of the Movement to End Racism and Islamophobia, a board member of the Interfaith in Winston-Salem, and trustee of Parliament of the World's Religions. Imam Khalid is a human rights and prison reform activist, national lecturer, freelance writer, and author of Come Let Us Change This World, a brief history of the Islamic Party in North America. He is the former editor of ICNA's Message magazine, Community Access Television Board Chairman, producer, and host, and the co-convener of Black Leadership Roundtable of Winston-Salem, Forsyth County. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Imam. Next.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Next, we have Imam Siraj Wahaj. Imam Siraj is the Imam of Masjid Taqwa in New York and is well known amongst the Muslims in North America as a dynamic and tireless supporter of Islamic causes. One of my favorite dynamic speakers. Imam Siraj Wahaj, currently the Imam of Masjid Taqwa in Brooklyn, accepted Islam in 1969. He received his Imam training at Al-Qura University in Mecca in 1978 and has gone on to become a national and international speaker on Islam. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I have to say something. Right now. I'm sitting here listening to your introduction to Imam Khalid, and I'm asking myself, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? So I'm thinking about leaving, so I may stay a little while, but I'll see.
Astaghfirullah, Sheikh.
Definitely, we would love your perspective, Imam Siraj, and we hope you will join us for the whole program. Lastly, we have Brother Mustafa White. Brother Mustafa is originally from the South, but moved to Washington, D.C., where he finished his college education. It was in Washington where many years ago he became active with different social groups. Brother Mustafa currently is the treasurer for Helping Hand for Relief and Development, an organization dedicated to helping humanity worldwide with disaster relief and social and economic improvement projects, and has served on its board since 2013. Brother Mustafa is also a board member of the Islamic Outreach Center, a project of ICNA, a nonprofit in Cypress, Texas, devoted to promoting a clear understanding of the Muslim community and its message in the Houston and surrounding areas. Finally, Brother Mustafa works with the Islamic Circle of North America in Houston, a nonprofit serving the needs of the Houston area with shelter homes, food pantries, and other human services. ICNA answers the call for social justice in the area and cooperates with like-minded groups. And Brother Mustafa has served on this board since 2008. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mustafa.
Wa alaikum salam wa barakatuh. How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
And I agree with Imam Siraj. We just need to sit back and let Brother Khalid talk, and we'll shake our heads.
Astaghfirullah.
Inshallah.
So welcome, Imams. And first of all, I just want to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us the opportunity to hear from every single one of you. And normally what we typically do is we keep the intros a little bit short. We keep the biographies a little bit short. However, in this case, for the attendees that might not know who you are, I want them to truly understand exactly where the answers are coming from. And one way to do that is to really show the authenticity of the speakers that we have here on our program, inshallah. So without further ado, why do Black Lives Matter to Muslims is the name of the event. So I want to start off at the very top, inshallah ta'ala, with a very simple question. What is Black Lives Matter? And please feel free to jump in, inshallah, whoever wants to answer.
Okay. Black Lives Matter is a movement, a necessary movement. It's a movement that I agree with, that I think all of us agree with. And I know the response, the knee-jerk response, when you say Black Lives Matter, people are going to say all life matter. And to be honest with you, when a Black person say Black Lives Matter, and your response is all lives matter, what you're saying is correct, but it's an insult. It's an insult because we don't understand what a black person is saying. Because if all lives matter, black people don't have to say Black Lives Matter. Yeah. So Black Lives Matter is it's an introduction to what they really want to say. It's really saying Black Lives Matter also. And during the course of this talk, we're going to, our program, we're going to talk about and why the need of having this movement that came into existence maybe about 3 years ago. I think it came into existence about 3 years ago. Black Lives Matter.
Okay.
I'll just briefly add that this is an organization that officially started after the extrajudicial killing of Trayvon Martin by the wannabe cop or wannabe watchman Zimmerman, Forrest Zimmerman, in 2012. So in 2013, there were 3 female African-American female activists that came together in response to this particular killing. It wasn't the first time that an unarmed African-American was killed by a policeman in the streets, but it was very dramatic to the public, the way that we understood and received information. So these 3 individuals came together and formed a group that today has over 40 chapters around the country. As Imam Siraj stated, it's a necessary group, primarily because of the systemic and institutional racism that has kept African-American people in general at the bottom of the social life of this nation. The process started, of course, with the transatlantic trade and enslaved Africans, and basically continues until this day. So it's a movement for the Black affirmation of Black humanity, something that we as Muslims, and of course we'll get into this more, but we as Muslims have we have no excuse. There's no reason to me that we can't, whether we're talking about the specific organization of Black Lives Matter, but more importantly, the affirmation of Black life and Black humanity in this country that has been denied for so many centuries here.
Jazakallah khairan, Imam. But why, so Imam, I'm going to ask a counter question here, but why is it singling out Black lives? Why not Hispanic lives, or why not Asian lives, or why not any other life? Why is it Black Lives Matter? So I think, Imam Siraj, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's muted.
Yeah, take it off mute.
We good now?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Hey, pump your volume up a little bit, Imam Siraj, if you can.
My volume up?
Yep, get a little more volume if you can.
Okay, give me a second. Let one of the, it's gonna take me a minute. Hold on 1 second.
So in that time, Brother Mustafa, would you want to add anything on to it?
Any difference, or it's okay? It's the same?
Just,
It's a little better.
yeah.
It's a little bit better, but not still?
No, it's still not.
Okay. Okay, someone answer. Let me work on it right now.
No, my position, Black Lives Matter, as I agree with Brother Khalid and Brother Siraj said, and that it seems that in the last 50 years, all that the civil rights movement has striven for has been wiped away. We find ourselves back in the same position we were when we were kids growing up, seeking justice for the African-American people. And we know all of these extrajudicial killings, all of the oppression that the Black community is faced with is systemic. And that's why we agree with Black Lives Matter. The details, there may be some difference in the details, but we have to stand with this group that stands with the preservation of Black life and its existence.
Yeah.
So Brother Mustafa, you said systemic. What do you mean by that?
Let's see, there's Ibrahim X. Kendi's book called Stamped. There is, in the federal laws and state laws, things that naturally keep African Americans in their place. It's established, it's recorded, it's documented. That just the simplest part was Jim Crow laws. They've been removed, but there's a lot of things that are still there that we've been stamped with from the beginning, and that book really lays it out very, very well about this is a system that continues everything that African Americans do. They continue to go at it in such a negative way to keep Black people in place.
Yeah.
I
No,
want to.
no.
Can I, Imam? Can I add this?
Yeah, please. I'm sorry.
Can I add this? Brother Azim, when you, I think, I'll be honest with you, I think that most people, even a lot of Black people, don't even know how bad it is. We think it's, oh, you know, you had some problems years ago, Jim Crow is different now, you know, Black people made a lot of progress. But let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, Allah said in the Quran, وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ وَأَنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Allah knows and you don't know. And I'm saying that a lot of people don't know. And there's a critical issue about having the information. Black Lives Matter and the Muslims and the African Americans, our job is to let the people know. Let me give you one example. You know, I study you know, the current events, and we all study current events. And current events tell you what's going on. I read newspapers. You want to find out what's going on. But if you want to find out what happened, you have to read history. Martin Luther King Jr. said something interesting. He said, "He who gets behind in a race must forever remain behind or run faster than the man up front." I don't know if you've ever run track, but it's like a 100-yard dash. Black people starting at the beginning, and everybody else is at the 50-yard, distance. Let me give you an example. Someone asked the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. He said, "The one with the longest life and the best deeds." The one with the longest life and the best deeds. Let's look at the life expectancy of the average American. The life expectancy of the average American is 78.6 years. That ranks number 45 in all the countries. America is 45th on the list. But if you look at the African American man, the life expectancy isn't 78.6, but it's really 71.5 years. If it were a nation, we would be not the 45th, but 111th. Why is it that Black people have, white people have 10 times more wealth than the average African American? How come that Black people represent 12% of the population, but 33% of the prison population? And we can go on and on and on and on. But the question is, how did it get that way? So that's why we're talking about Black Lives Matter. Sure, all lives matter, but right now we're talking about a race of people because of their color are looked down upon, and all of these things in society have conjoined together to destroy. And really, it's amazing that we're still alive. It's amazing that Black people still exist after all. And during the show, we're going to show you more about what happened, why is it still happening, and what are we going to do about it. Because one of my theses today is, what do you want America to be? Answer, what do you want it to be? Question is, what are you prepared to do to make it what it's supposed to be? As a Muslim, what's our obligation toward Black Lives Matter?
Right. If I could just comment briefly on your question, why Black Lives Matter and not Latino or some other group at this particular point. You know, the dehumanization that people of African descent have gone through in this country is very unique. There's been no other group of people who have been systematically robbed of their religious identity, of their language, of their culture, And this is even before talking about the institution of chattel slavery. And so there's no other people, unless we're talking about Native Americans. And Native Americans, when you look at their population, before the advent of European colonialism in this part of the world, they have almost been eliminated off the face of the earth. I mean, literally eliminated. With that exception, there's been no immigrant community to come to this area called America who has suffered from that kind of systematic dehumanization. And that dehumanization has impacted and affected not just people of African descent, but white folks and others who are here, who have adopted and embraced that Black people are an inferior creatures, and that our rightful place is that of servants or slaves to other people. And so it's very compelling reasons why, if you're going to try to correct the injustices of American society, that you start with the historically and contemporarily most oppressed, the most repressed group in this country. And quickly, just one last thing. I honestly believe that if it were any of the children who were being shot down in these extrajudicial killings by the police, not just martial law, it would have been declared a national emergency a long time ago. But yet, this country is so conditioned, and even some of us are so conditioned to accept how these cops are killing these Black men and Black women. Black men primarily on the streets. Black women, is, if you look at it, in recent years, is happening in their homes. Like Breonna Taylor out in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a long list of Breonna Taylors who have been executed in their homes by police coming there, kicking in the door or whatever, and they end up dead, right? Most of them not guilty of any crime. It would be a national declared emergency that would not let up if these people, these young people, were anyone, in my humble opinion, anyone other than Black folks. So this, and for all these other compelling reasons, if we're going to, especially as Muslims, if we are going to do more than just lip service to standing up for justice and helping the oppressed and all of that, we have to start with the most oppressed group in this country, and I contend that it's people of African descent.
Jazakallah khairan, Imam. You touched on police brutality and judicial killings. Can you expand on that? And why is it, you know, when the killings happen against Black people, we have a whole movement, but isn't police brutality affecting a whole range of people?
Yeah, it's affecting a whole range of people, but statistically it's not to the degree that it's affecting a population which is not anywhere close to being the majority population in this country. As a matter of fact, statistically, the Hispanic community, and I'm not saying go target Hispanics, but statistically, the Hispanic community, the Latino community, is larger than the African-American community. But yet, we suffer from the largest percentage, the largest number of individuals who are killed in extrajudicial killings and murders by police departments all across the country. And the root cause of this, it's just quickly, just a few root causes. One is the embrace of racist attitudes by members of the police department, those who are supervising them, and those predominantly, overwhelmingly white presidents who I would have to say, you know, I don't know any of them individually, but I would have to think that they must condone the execution of Black people in the streets like that if they are one of the greatest obstacles to the prosecution and the imprisonment, and I think sometimes the death penalty being applied to these officers. They are wilding within impunity. They're going crazy on black folks with impunity. So sure, other people are suffering, but it is so much out of proportion, the number of black folks who are being killed by police. And we'll get into later talking about the prison incarceration numbers, those under penal supervision if they're not actually in jail. The numbers related to black people, there's no comparison with any other population group. And it's so large that with most of these groups, you can combine many of their numbers and it wouldn't equal up to the numbers that we have in the black community.
Azim, I think that every black person that I know have an experience with the police. All of us are doing. I had my first experience at 18 years old. I'm a student at New York University. And one day, some people were talking about having a protest, a strike. And I was standing in front of the building that I go to, trying to determine whether I'm going to class or not. So white policeman came to me and said, "Move on." I said, "I'm a student here." He said, "I told you to move on." And he arrested me. They took me, I'll never forget this. They took me to the precinct, right? And they took the handcuffs off me. One police officer, white police officer, I'll never forget this. I talked to my mother about this a couple of days ago. He took his gun out and put it on the desk and said, "Would you like to go get that?" So this like you said, "Oh, Imam, it doesn't really," it does. You ask any black person, any black man, I have to tell my sons, I know my son, you be careful. They talk to you, they approach you, yes sir, no sir, you be polite and make no strange moves. And every black man can tell you some story they had with some white policemen.
Since the time of the enslavement of the black man from Africa, this control of black people has been there. Nothing has changed since the time we were in bondage until the time we were supposedly freed in 1863 up till now. This continues till today, that we have these systems that take place relating to the white society, keeping us in check from the top government down to the local level. All of it has been in sync from the time of slavery. And regardless of the sphere of life that we're talking about, specifically my area is like economics. In the mid 1860s, African Americans owned 0.5% of America. Right now, it is said that African Americans own 0.5% of America. Nothing has changed. Every time we attempt to get out of this situation, Tulsa, Oklahoma is burned. Colfax, Louisiana is burned. Rosewood, Texas, burned. The riots in Atlanta, the riots in DC. Everywhere we raise our head, one reason or another, that the white suppression comes down upon black folks. We suffer this thing, and that's why black lives matter. It may not matter to anybody else, but it matters to us.
Yeah, let me add this. Very excellent points both of you all are making. Even closer to the times we're living right now, in 2008, when so many black folks lost their houses because of these subprime lending practices of these major banks across the country, and loans were given to black folk, and black folks, we were so happy to be able to get loans because of redlining and all these other things. We weren't able to the same degree as other folks to even get loans for houses. If we got them, they were very high interest rates. But what happened with loaning all this money, it was a deliberate attempt to take the properties of African-American people. Now, to me, this in 2008 and 2009, this was a modern day Black Wall Street, because black folks in this country at one period lost the largest amount of wealth that we ever had, counting Black Wall Street and the other cities like that. The subprime lending scam and these mortgage loans given to people that the banks knew that they couldn't pay it, and they were going to have to take the houses back. That was the largest black wealth loss in the history of this country. And so it's not even just historical issues. And if I could just bring up one thing as it relates to the police, the model that policing is based on in the United States are slave patrols. In the early 1700s in South Carolina, slave patrols were organized, formulated. Their responsibility primarily was to go out and capture the enslaved folks once they've gotten off the plantation and bring them back. That role became ingrained. It was an institutional position. Part of their responsibility was to protect the wealth and the property of these plantation owners. This is a model, and this is not just mythology coming from me. This is an historical fact that modern day policing in this country is based on slave patrols, the same role and job descriptions that these folks had back then during the period of enslavement is the same way that they are carrying it out today. Protect the property. This is why there's such outrage when you see in urban rebellions, people who have been systemically oppressed and made to suffer in so many ways for so long. Corporate media has duped some of us so bad that we get more upset about J.C. Penney getting their window broken than we are about why people are smashing the window. A human life has been lost, but people are, oh, look at them people, look at what they're doing. I mean, heck, get angry about the cause of these urban rebellions, which should be separated from demonstration, peaceful demonstration. It's not those who've come to these events to peacefully demonstrate that are carrying this stuff out. There are people in the community who are in need of food, right? They're smashing Piggly Wiggly's window out to get some food that they can't have because cutting food stamps, because of, low income, below minimum wage jobs with these waiters and waitresses and all this kind of stuff. So if we're going to get upset with somebody, don't get upset with the people participating in urban rebellions. Get upset with the people who are killing these folks on the street and in their homes with impunity. Nothing is what happening to them.
Can I add one thing, just really one sentence to what Imam said? I agree with 100%. Something John F. Kennedy said, and I think we should listen to it. He said, those who will make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. And this is what we're dealing with right now. And really, if you think about it, Islam is a proof of that. For the first 13 years, Muslims were oppressed and they were forbidden even to fight back. And it wasn't until after they made migration, Allah revealed, fight those who fight against you. Now permission is given to fight. So what you see now, as the Imam have said, as frustration. Listen, we're Muslims, right? We have to be patient. And we're not going to, to suggest to people it's okay to be unjust, because sometimes the people, some stores you're burning belong to Black people. So we're not talking about that, but we're just talking about that reaction. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. No, jazakumullah khairan. And subhanAllah, it's you guys touched on police brutality. So I wanna just ask a question here, and then inshallah we'll move on to the systemic racism as well as the protesting and what's the cause of that. When the video of George Floyd came out, and it's not something to see for the faint of heart, right? The officer had his knee on the man's neck for over 8 minutes. As somebody who's done martial arts, a few seconds is enough to put somebody to sleep, let alone over 8 minutes. So only Allah knows the amount of damage that caused him internally and in his brain. But one very strong response that came out after that, aside from the Afro-American and the pro-justice response, was that from the police departments, and it was, these are just a few bad apples. So what is the response to that?
First of all, I couldn't spend time watching a man get murdered on TV in prime time. Most of the people I know who saw that made them sick. It made the youngsters angry. And this few bad apples thing is you yeah, that apple spoils the bunch. You have to remove that apple. And we keep hearing that as an excuse. It's no longer an excuse. It's just a cliche now. That they just keep adding, these police unions just keep adding, oh, with few bad apples, we got to clean this up. But the whole point is that what we're talking about here is the systemic injustices that are taking place against African American people in the streets, especially the police. And the predation. Predation is the concept of, do you have laws on the books and you're going to hurt people, but it holds nobody accountable. And that's what's happening by all the killings. Very few people are brought to account for these killings of African American people in their homes, in the street, or things of that nature, because they're protected by the laws. This predation is a problem economically, socially, and politically. They know who it's going to harm, but they'll just look back and say, on the books, he did it according to how he was trained. He's okay. It was a good kill. As a matter of fact, I heard one sheriff from Georgia, American, said it was a good shoot. I'm like, really, man? Really? Yeah. He said he trains police, and he said everything he saw in that video for the young man killed in Atlanta, he said it was a good shoot. Mm-hmm. And they lose me. So the frustration is going to the streets now.
Can I add something?
Sure.
You know, one hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said really sheds a lot of light on this. He said, "Undur akhaka zalimun am mazlumun." He said, help your brother if he's oppressed or if he's an oppressor. And man said, yeah, Rasulullah, I help him if he's oppressed. But how do I help him if he's the oppressor? He said, stop him from the oppression. Okay, 3 policemen witnessed this man murdering him. They witnessed it and they saw it and they did nothing about it. It's called the blue wall of silence. Don't tell me it's a few bad apples. No. We have to reform it all the way through or get rid of those people. And we can give you a long list of policemen who witnessed murder. Listen to the ayat that was given earlier today. Harvard Law School, in the entrance of the faculty library is a verse from the Quran. That very verse, "Oh, you believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses for Allah, even against yourself, or against your parents, or your near relatives, against the rich or the poor." This is where we're supposed to be. If it was a few bad apples, the police themselves will be turning other police in, but it doesn't happen. Sorry.
Yep. And you know what, Imam, that was an excellent point, and Brother Mustafa, excellent point. You know, if it were just a few bad apples, these bad apples would be killing white people in the streets. They'd be killing Jewish people in the streets. They would be killing indiscriminately, carrying out these acts of violence and extrajudicial street killings on other people. But for the most part, it's overwhelmingly, they are targeting African-American people. I want to share a real quick experience I had in college that sort of freaked me out. Going to school in DC. I had gotten married after my sophomore year in school. And my then wife was working in one of the most racist counties. It was then, I don't know how it is now, Prince George County, right across the line from Washington, DC. And she was working in a drugstore there. And myself and a good friend of mine were picking her up one night from work. And we're sitting in the car, you know, just having a casual conversation. And the next thing I know, on my friend's side, on the passenger side, this cop comes up with a rifle, pointing it in the car up against his head. And on my side, this cop comes and points a gun into my temple. And my friend, who was a little, this is before Islam for me too, and my friend was a little naive, started running his mouth, and I, you know, wanted to choke him out. I said, look, now ain't the time to show your manhood, but these folks will kill you. And you're doing nothing but sitting in the car, doing nothing, waiting for somebody to get off work to go back home. And so you know, as Imam Siraj pointed out, every African American man either has a story or knows someone who has a story. There's no other group of people in this country, and America is the most diverse nation in the world, where any other parents or uncles or grandparents have to tell their boys how to survive being out in the streets if a cop either stops you at a traffic stop or if he approaches you. It's a fear. It's a earned fear that Black people have for their Black male children and grandchildren because of historically and right now what is going on and what is happening. So it's all rooted in racism. It's systemic, structural racism that allows this kind of nonsense with these unions, also with this thing called qualified immunity, which on the books in so many areas that protects so-called public servants from the fullest extent of the law when they do wrong. They're halfway protected, and this just gets taken to the extreme. So that's another reason we're not seeing more of these criminals going to jail. You kill somebody in one city or one town, and they just go to the next town or two towns below, and they get, next thing you know, these people we're reading about, these killer cops, are quietly law enforcement officers somewhere else. You know, there's national tracking and database to stop these jokers from going from one police department to the other.
On the other hand, I'm sorry, I got to do this. I'm sorry, I got to add this, right? Elaine, would you permit me?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. On the other hand, right, every year, and I want you to listen to these figures, I didn't make them up, okay? Every year, 10,000 innocent people are convicted. Every year, 10,000 innocent people are convicted, many of them Black. Just 2 days ago, I read about a Black man who was in prison for 46 years, innocent. He was exonerated. So, the question is, these are the facts. Number one, a Black person is more apt to get arrested. If he gets arrested, he's going to be convicted and go to jail more than anyone else. That's the reality. And so 85% of the cases adjudicated in America are won or lost in a very jury selection process. So a lot of innocent people are locked up in jail. But the good thing about it, a lot of people, prisoners, become Muslims in prison.
Yeah.
Every year, between 35,000 and 40,000 inmates become Muslims. So that's the good part.
Alhamdulillah.
It's the fastest growing population of Muslims in the country.
There you go.
Out of the prisons. We can't beat it.
There you go.
Can't make that up.
You know, we would pray that Allah keep them steadfast on the religion.
I mean.
So we touched a little bit on what this movement is, what gave rise to this movement. We touched a little bit about police brutality and extrajudicial killings. And now, inshallah, I want to get into the one last question, and inshallah we'll get into the movement and what Muslims can do to support the movement and the Islamic side of the movement. A lot of our brothers and sisters actually, you know, since the turn of the decade, are going more and more into the force. What advice would you have for them when they see themselves at a crossroad?
They're going into the force?
Yeah, into like becoming police officers.
Okay.
To be going, I'm sorry, say it again.
So we have many of our brothers and sisters, you know, family, friends, and whatnot, going into becoming police officers.
Oh, okay.
What advice would you have for them?
Oh, okay. I would just say stick to your tradition. You're Muslim. I'm a Muslim. You know, I have several identities. You know, look at me. I'm an Aswad. I'm Black. And by the way, I love being Black. I can't wait to wake up every morning black. But ask me why. Because
Why?
Allah said, "Huwa alladhi yusawwirukum fil arhami kayfa yasha." Because it's Allah who created you in the womb as He pleased. And if Allah pleased to make me a black man, I'm happy to be a black man. So number one, ana aswad. Number two, ana afrikiyun. I'm African. Ana American. I'm American. Ana bashar. I'm a human being. I'm a Muslim. And I realized as a Muslim, listen, I was born in America, I'm an American. I'm born black, I'm black. But my choice was to become Muslim. And I know for a fact, there is not one black person in Jannah, in paradise, because they're black. And not one white person in hell because they're white. No, you're in Jannah because of Allah's mercy and your good deeds, and you're in hell because of your bad deeds. So I'm saying if you're going to be a police officer, if you're going to be a president of the United States of America as a Muslim, if you're going to become a governor or a mayor or whatever you're going to become, never forget your tradition. You are a believer and you're a slave of Allah, and you have to ask the question, why am I doing this? I don't want us to follow the crowd because the crowd is doing it. It's the in thing to do. Yeah, did you go to the protest? I went to the protest. Innamal a'malu binniyat. Our deeds shall be judged by our intentions, and we should go if we go alone or we go with a crowd. But we have to do it for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember that you are a Muslim, and everything you do, you're guided by the Quran and the Sunnah.
Yeah. You know, this whole thing about whether or not increasing numbers of Muslims should join these police forces, I say yes, but only if we are going, as Imam Siraj is saying, bring our Islam with us. Don't leave behind the Sunnah. Don't leave behind the Quran. Don't leave behind our humanity and join a police department that is brutalizing and committing dhulm, this oppressing people. If we bring our Islam to the force, even years before, just with African Americans, like in places like where I'm from, it was a big deal when the first African Americans were allowed on the police force. It was a big deal. And so you had a singular black guy who was a real humanitarian kind of guy. And he may not have been the absolute first, but he was the first one as a child that I became knowledgeable of, this Officer Red. He was like an officer-friendly kind of guy, a real community policing. People knew him. They knew he was not there to oppress people. To me, and the Muslims going into these police forces, we need the Officer Reds. We need us to be Muslim when we get in these positions. Let me give you an example. It wasn't from a Muslim, but it was from an African-American major in the police department in Winston-Salem. One of the things that I had done over the years was doing a lot of anti-drug work. And one from the platform, I was directing a nonprofit organization. And I started to change the script of what we were supposed to be doing. And so this black major in the police department told me, he said he came over to a housing area, a public housing area. And I was standing over there, and he told me, he said, look, he said, it's not my job to do this, but I know you are trying to be serious about trying to help the community, and I'm going to tell you that the word that the police are getting on the street is that the next time you step foot in these Cleveland homes, these public housing units, somebody is, and it's already designated who is going to come up behind you, put a gun in the back of your ear and shoot you dead, right? And so were it not, I mean, this was Allah's way. I know it all came from Allah, but it was Allah's way to protect me. Maybe I had a few more years. I'm supposed to be doing something. This wasn't exactly my time to get out of here, but it was this not officer friendly, but it was a person of responsibility who was African American in the police department that warned me that they knew that this was going to happen. So if there were only just racist fools in the department there, no one would have said anything to me. And so in every instance we find, and Imam Siraj, I know, knows this much better than me, I've always been surprised at the number of Muslim police officers in New York.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I've been surprised how the brothers and sisters just embrace them. These are, these are just one of the brothers in the ranks. And so I think we should try to increase that. As Muslims, we need that kind of protection, those kind of alerts coming from, from law enforcement to help us avoid not criminal behavior, but when we're not doing anything criminal, to help us avoid some of these negative consequences. So I think it's a good thing. Just don't check your Islam, when you go and put on your badge, when you change clothes. Don't leave your Islam just because you're taking off your thobe and putting on a police uniform. Don't take off your Islam while you are wearing that uniform.
Absolutely.
But I just want to comment on that, and I heard what the Imam said. I just have mixed feelings about joining the police force.
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality on the ground that you hear. I've lived in Baltimore, I lived in New Orleans, I'm in Houston right now. 6 officers that were fired in Atlanta that dragged those 2 college kids out of the car,
Right.
They were African American. I think all 5 of them were.
Yep.
So the Muslims that are attempting to go into the police force, what are they bringing of themselves into that? What do they understand of the religion?
Sure.
They realize their responsibilities are, and that's
Sure.
that I'm concerned about.
Right.
And are you going into a burning house? The police
Mm-hmm.
force is as corrupt as it gets. And say, what are you going into, and what do you bring to the table? Unless you're a rare individual, it's going to be very difficult for you. I'm not trying to give a fatwa here, but I have difficulty joining the police force.
Mustafa,
Yeah.
I want to say this, and I agree with you. Mustafa, I agree with you, right? But I want to say this, right? Many Muslims say rightly, Islam is perfect, and Muslims are not perfect. I agree with that, right? But the reality is that maybe many Americans may never read one verse of Quran or one hadith, but every American has some contact with Muslims. Schoolmate, store, doctor, neighbors, whatever it is, right? And they're going to judge Islam not by what they read from the Quran, because they don't know Quran, or what they know from Hadith. They don't know Hadith, but they know Muslims. And we have to do the job as a Muslim wherever we are, whether we in the army, that's another question, whether we police, or whether we become politicians, right? So we have to, Imam Khalid said it, let's bring out Islam with us. And I understand the reservation, Imam, I'm with you. I do get it. I hope that we can do better, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. No, Jazakumullah khairan. One thing we just wanted to emphasize about this program is that it is a discussion, and we have a lot of different perspectives on the call here right now, which makes it a lot more beneficial for us and all the viewers. Just want to take this time real quick to remind all the viewers that inshallah this is going to be a series of programs. So this is the first of many series, inshallah, so that we don't just have the conversation and we leave it off. And we say, oh yeah, we did our part and we had an event about it, and then that's it. Inshallah, it's going to be a series of events. So now, Imams, I want to get into, inshallah, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, right? So for some Muslims, it is a movement that is not Islamic in nature. It is a movement that is not, calling to just Muslims. It's calling to the whole of the people here in America. And subhanAllah, we see all of these protests and the movement taking ground in many other countries as well, outside of America. But for the Muslim that is still on the fence about something like this, and they might have the following question: that how do Muslims support a movement that is not Islamic in nature?
Can I answer that?
Absolutely.
And I'm going to invoke a brother I was with recently, Ibrahim Rasool. Ibrahim Rasool was a South African ambassador to the United States, right? South Africa. When we talk about South Africa, everybody talk about Nelson Mandela. He was in prison 27 years. Ibrahim Rasool was in prison for 20 years. 20 years. And he fought against apartheid. When you look at the percentage of the Muslims in South Africa, less than 2%.
Mm-hmm.
But yet, when Nelson Mandela became the president of South Africa, 17 Muslims were members of parliament. He had a number of Muslims in his cabinet, including the chief minister of justice. And so this is what Ibrahim Rasul said. First of all, I want to mention one of the prophets, Muawiyah, one of the prophet's companions, Muawiyah. He said, "La hikima illa du tajriba." There's no real wisdom without experience. And so I lean to people like Ibrahim Rasul to get their experiences. And he taught me this lesson, a very valuable lesson. He said, you have to understand your relationship with people, right? Sometimes we have a common issue. Has nothing to do with your ideology, your aqidah, your faith. It has nothing to do with that. It's an issue, right? An issue was George Floyd was murdered. We got to do something about that. So you march together. Have you ever heard of the Congressional Black Caucus? The Congressional Black Caucus are legislators, black legislators who work for their constituency. In the model of the Congressional Black Caucus, black people have neither permanent friends nor permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So if you have an issue, it's a limited relationship. What you want to call it, nomenclature. It doesn't matter. You want to call it a partnership, okay. And then number two, you have a common objective. So you have a relationship based on that objective. Listen, we have to have police reform. So the people that come together, and they may be Muslims and non-Muslims or whatever the case may be. And I understand the concern of the Muslims. He said then the third thing is common values. You have the same value. Now you have an alliance. It's different words, right? So this is the point. Muslims ought not, I understand criticism, I understand debate, but you have to appreciate what you're trying to achieve. And what you're trying to achieve, who you're going to work with, right? So every time you see a Muslim working with a non-Muslim, don't say, no, man, astaghfirullah, what you're doing. وَتِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ لَا تَعْتَدُوهَا. Allah said, these are the boundaries, don't go past them. So as long as you understand that, and by working with these people, you'd be surprised, many of them may in fact become Muslim, because interacting with the Muslims, you're doing the da'wah. So that's the general thing. There are times that you have to make a decision when you can work with other people, and there are times you can't work with other people.
Yeah, if I could just add quickly that, and Allah forgive me, and I've asked you all to forgive me for, there's no ill intent or malice behind what I'm about to say. But, my entire Muslim life, I have tried to be involved in social justice issues and trying to translate the guidance of Islam to the life of the general community and particularly to the oppressed community. And what I have found over the years is that there are many Muslims who will use any excuse not to participate and get involved in a struggle that may cause them maybe to lose favor with their co-workers or their boss, may cause them to lose their job or things like that. I mean, we don't want to give up anything. We have achieved and attained certain things, and we don't want to give it up messing with those people. But honestly, I feel in the bottom of my heart that if a Muslim cannot see that this is a human rights issue, what this Black Lives Matter and all of the concurrent movements around this issue of not just police brutality, the Black disenfranchisement right now, what's going on across the states, all across the country, is almost the same thing that was happening in the 1950s, in 1960s in the South. People coming up with poll tax. Somebody want to register to vote, and they say, okay, well, you got to recite certain clauses of the Constitution. Just ridiculous stuff that people could meet. They had no way possible to meet these qualifications. And so what's going on right now is the same degree of disenfranchisement, and it's targeted towards Black people by closing down voting areas, voting booths in these predominantly African-American areas.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Playing all kinds of games with the votes and this kind of thing. So it's a bigger issue. We're talking about police, but it's such a large issue that if I don't understand what's going on with this targeted killing and murder of Black folks by the police, then maybe I can understand voter disenfranchisement, how Black people in 2020 are everything that can possibly be done is being done to hold down the numbers of the Black folks when it comes to this presidential and these local, things. So let's pick out areas, Muslims. Maybe I can't get to police brutality. I can't get to that. Well, pick voting, pick redlining, and Mustafa Brother Mustafa understands this much better than me. This practice that's been going on seems like forever of people, real estate folks and insurance people literally drawing red lines. They used to have them in their offices, now they have to hide them. But they're drawing red lines around certain communities and certain insurances that's afforded, bank loans, kind of stuff, drawing red lining around Black folks in particular to keep us out of certain neighborhoods, to charge exorbitant interest rates. I mean, we shouldn't be paying interest anyway, but those Muslims who are involved in this rate, if they're African American, if you go, Brother Azim, to purchase a house, and I go to purchase a house, my interest rate, if I'm paying interest, is going to be considerably higher than what you're paying. So pick our area, Muslims. If we can't get to one area of oppression and say that these people are being targeted, pick your area. Because in every aspect of American life, there is systemic structural racism that specifically targets Black folks. And then other people get caught in the spillover coming from the oppression of Blacks. Let me say one other quick thing. Imam and Brother Mustafa, after 9/11, I heard so many of my new coming brothers to the United States, Muslim brothers who come, within the last few years, or 20 years, or whatever, saying, "Oh, yeah, we are the new N-word. We are the ones who are now the target of oppression and systemic targeted with Islamophobia." No, you're not. Don't think that for a minute. You had to live the life of Black folks and Black Muslims in this country for one day. You would never let that come out of your mouth again, even though I'm not denying Islamophobia. I'm not denying that at all. But I'm just saying there's no group of people outside of Native Americans who can mirror their collective experience and relationship to this society and equal and come up looking at African Americans and you see yourself. No, it ain't there. I'm not talking about a misery index who's been suffering the most. I'm just talking about some of the social realities that govern this nation. And as Muslims, if we are living here, we need to exert ourselves more to understand the dynamics that have brought things to the point where they are today in the United States of America.
Imam, I love you. Imam, I love
Brother Khalid,
Brother Khalid. Mustafa, 1 second, Mustafa, let me say this. Imam Khalid, right?
Yes.
I love you so much that if I were with you right now, I would kiss you on the forehead. Go ahead, Mustafa.
So Brother Khalid and I go back. We go back 40 odd years, me and Brother Khalid, and we were part of the Islamic Party. But Brother Khalid headed up what we thought was necessary for an organization like ours. Brother Khalid headed up the Oppressed People's Affairs Department.
Yep.
That's what got him started. Allah knows best. But the point is that the movement was connected to the Oppressed People's Affairs because that was where our focus was going to be, to help people and we will always be aware, like Imam Siraj says, of the current events. Brother Khalid, he was at political rallies. He was at this thing and that thing across the country. I even think he went to Libya at that time.
Yep.
Kept us abreast of what was happening, and we need more of those kind of oppressed people's affairs. Like Brother Khalid said, you can pick and choose. Then, if you ain't brave enough to go to the streets, then maybe you can write a letter.
Right.
But those kind of things are needed and be aware in the Muslim community, because the Muslim community now is perhaps just reacting to what's happening and trying to figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
And we shouldn't be reacting. We should have our platform should be clear about these kinds of things. And Brother Khalid, I'm pointing to Brother Khalid because he started all this back in the mid-'70s. So
let me say this. I want to say this. And I think it's really important about Muslims, right? And how we think. First of all, we have a mandate from the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him. Whoever sees an evil, change it with his hand. Right. So you got to first, if you recognize that this is an evil, okay, what are you going to do about it? Imam, I can't change in my hand. Okay, change with your tongue. Can you say something? Right? Do you make dua at least? Do you make dua, man, about these people that beat people being oppressed? You make dua? Let me say something. I was a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, I was in the West Coast, and I was in my favorite hotel called the Doubletree Hotel, and I love that hotel. And every room had a card in it, and the card said, "When you care, it shows. When you care, it shows." And I would also argue, when you don't care, it shows. I'm a student at New York University, right? In all my years of being a student at the university, New York University, no Muslims came to me. Not even a flyer. Never, nothing. But you know who came? A group called the Nation of Islam. The group that Malcolm X was in, Muhammad Ali was, Imam Siraj Wahaj was. And what they did, they showed their concern, right? You and the rest of us say, oh, the Nation of Islam, they don't have the right aqidah. You would be correct. But yet, they cared about the people. And the people know it. I myself, as a student, I quit my job to sell a 25-cent newspaper called Muhammad Speaks. And I knocked on the doors in the hood, in the ghettos, and in the projects. I knocked on doors. I got 1,000 customers. And those people who I came to, Nation of Islam, not a real Muslim, they invited me to their funerals, to their graduations, to their marriages. They loved me and I loved them. What I'm saying is this: the Muslims, do we care about the people? I'm saying, do we really care about the people, or we give lip service? So I'm with the Imam. You know, I'm saying you have a mandate, right? So we hide behind the excuse, well, they don't have the right aqidah. We can't do that because we shut up, man. So listen, I remember Imam 25 years ago, Muslims asked the question, are we permitted to vote? It's a big raging argument. I get it. I understood it, right? Now, probably no Muslims are saying that. We know the value of voting. We know how the game is played. We know how to get political power. We know how to get people out of office. And I'm going to give you one example. Seldom are white officers ever convicted for killing a black person. Seldom. But once in a while, you'll get one. Let me tell you one case last year in Dallas, Texas. A white police officer went in a black man's home and killed him in his home. And she said, I thought I was in my own apartment.
Right.
Right? I thought I was in my own apartment. She killed the man sitting down on his couch watching television. She killed him. But let me tell you something very interesting. She was convicted. Let me give you a hint, maybe why she was convicted. Consider this. The population of Dallas right now, 42% Hispanic, 29% white, 24% black. See that? Number two, the mayor of Dallas, black. The police chief, black. Dallas County District Attorney, black. The judge who presided over the case, black. Of the 12 jurors and 4 alternatives, 7 of them black, 4 white, and 5 other. You get it? You get it? Think about it.
Jazakallah khairan, Imam. So now I want to start, inshallah, getting a lot more pointed with the question as we get to our call of action for the Muslims as well. You know, many people have issues with the movement as well as the protests because of all the riots that have been happening. And you know, one thing that I got is, Islam doesn't promote rioting, and look what they're doing to their neighborhoods. Look what they're doing to their stores. Even though, subhanAllah, the Target CEO came out with a statement telling people how, you know, he can repair the stores, but what he wants to work towards is fixing this issue of systemic racism. So the people that don't join these protests because they might be scared of the police brutality, of being arrested, and of, you know, putting themselves into danger, and they kind of judge the whole protest, the whole movement by all the rioting that has been happening. What do we say to that?
Can I say something real quickly?
Absolutely.
First of all, I don't mean any harm in saying this, but I'm trying to be instructive to everyone. First of all, I think we should refrain from categorizing what we've been watching on television with some of this burning and this kind of thing as riots. It is a really charged word. As a matter of fact, during these times, I would dare say it's not politically correct. It's a term that had been used like in the 60s and 70s. And this was a term that it was like a dog whistle, politics, where you use a certain term or expression and it communicates with other people that have similar, views as you. And most of the time, this was the racists doing this. So when we say riot, we characterize what are urban rebellions or urban uprising as riot. It's a very charged language. And I just appeal to us to let's not refer to this as riots. As I mentioned earlier, some of the people who breaking into Piggly Wiggly, they're going in there to get eggs. They're going in there to try to get stuff to feed their families. And the reason why they can't feed their families is because oftentimes of working these jobs, getting non-living wages. People working 2 jobs and they're still on food stamps, like so many of the Walmart workers working for one of the richest corporations on the planet. And the majority of their workers, and not talking about management, they own food stamps. Same thing with McDonald's. There's something wrong with this picture. And so when these people oftentimes get out, it's an urban rebellion, not just against the immediate reason why people are in the streets, but and I'm not trying to justify criminality. Honestly, I'm not doing that. I mean, some things that are happening is, you would have to say it's criminality, but even stealing food in particular in Islam, if someone is taking food and they need that to eat, they're not just trying to get, some Krispy Kreme donuts, because they like Krispy Kreme, but if someone has the need to take someone else's food, take fruit off of somebody else's tree, then you don't punish that person, because it should be the responsibility of the neighbors and of the authorities to have folks in situations where they don't have to try to steal or take something from somebody else to survive. So like I said, I'm not justifying criminality, but it's at this moment in our history, it is politically incorrect. Just like years and years ago, when we talked about the system of racism, it was referred to as institutional racism, right? Then more lately, it had become structural racism. But in this, unfolding, the term of systemic racism is being used. So I had to, change my language. It's almost like, calling a black person colored or calling somebody a Negro. And at a time, it's fine. But at another time, it's insulting. It's not politically correct anymore. And I think that we can help with this dialogue and help our Muslim brothers and sisters not adopt some of the attitudes and the racist kind of dismissive attitudes we have of some folks in the community, particularly black folk, if we use language that is not immediately, characterizing them as criminals and, and this kind of thing, like this fool that we have in the White House today, in the way he wants to turn everything into a riot, everything into some kind of criminal act when people are just peacefully out there protesting.
I want to say this, Imam, for the record, and I agree with you, Imam, and we have to be careful of the language. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. said that a riot is the voice of the unheard.
Yeah.
And so we have that, and I agree with that, Imam, on the one hand, but on the other hand, I can't lie what we see. I saw people, Imam, they weren't going for food, they were going for sneakers, and they were going for TVs, right? So I'm saying, for the record, I'm against that. I'm against any of that. I'm not with that. I'm not with them burning down buildings. And I lived through the riots. We lived through the riots, man. And I saw our neighborhoods destroyed. So we got to also be careful about other people who join in the name of the protests, who are there with another agenda. So we got to be careful about that. But I want to address this issue that the questioner raised. And I'll be honest with you, we got to be careful about justification not to act. We stand on the sideline. Well, I'm not going to get involved because I don't want to, listen, you see these three imams there? Between the three of us, Mustafa, Khalid, we probably about 300 years, and Imam Khalid have 200 years of himself. So I'm saying we have a lot of experience, man. We did a lot of work, for Black people. And I want to say this too, since we're on this right now. There's not been a cause among Muslims that we have not joined, whether it was Bosnia or Yemen or Syria, or all of them. We have always been involved. Now all of a sudden, Muslims say, I don't know why you did it.
Very good point.
No. Yes. You got to check your heart, man. You got to
check
your heart. And I'm saying, if you don't want to be with us, those are my people. Because the prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said, every prophet that came to his people. With qala Musa liqawmihi, and when Moses said to his people, with qala Isa ibn Maryam ya bani Israel inni rasulullah ilaykum. Jesus said, "O children of Israel, I am a messenger of Allah to you." But this one, cool, ya yuhannas inni rasulullah ilaykum jami'a. Say, Muhammad, all mankind, I am the messenger of Allah to all of you. I believe that. And I believe all of us on the panel believe that. And therefore, whatever the cause is, justice, we're going to be there. And we ain't going to make no excuse why I'm not going to do it, man. I don't want to, because they have an agenda. Sure, everybody got an agenda, but you got an agenda too. When you're going to bring your agenda, when you're going to establish the truth, when you're going to go after the people, when you're going to show concern and love for the people. So I'm saying I'm against that, standing on the sidelines.
Yeah, I think that an excellent point about the supporting of everything outside of the U.S. Muslims are all over it. But when it comes to oppression in America, we're very immature about that. And we need to grow up and take hold of this situation, understand that oppression in one place and another place, it's all oppression. And we stand against that. I think Sherman Jackson talks about that maturity that we don't have in the U.S. And until the causes of oppression are addressed in this country by Muslims, we have not arrived yet. We're still on the sidelines debating, as the Imams has already said, whether we should get involved in this or that. Somebody being killed in Palestine is the same as somebody being killed on the streets of Chicago and New York. It's the same. And until we understand that dynamic, we're not matured enough as a community.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to what Imam Khalid was saying, and Imam Siraj, as well as Brother Mustafa, that this is a cause for justice. And I just want to summarize for the viewers, inshallah ta'ala, just the nature of my question. Number one, we support the movement because it is a call to justice. And Imam Siraj invoked the verse from the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to be just, even if it is against ourselves, our family, our children, so on and so forth. And how even the Prophet ﷺ has a hadith where he says that, you should help the oppressor as well as the oppressed. And once they asked, how do we, we understand that we can help the oppressed, but how do we help the oppressor? And it's to try to deter him from his oppressive ways. So Jazakumullah khairan, Imams, for that. Now, what can Muslims do to actually help out? Now, I'm sure there's a multivariable answer here, right? So let's inshallah start from the protests. Let's start from how we should feel and then get on to what we should be doing to make sure that this discussion just doesn't stop after a program or after, all the media frenzy is over, and that Muslims are continuing to internalize a lot of what is happening and understand, just like Brother Mustafa said, that, a person who dies in Palestine is the same as a person who dies here unjustly, right? So can we expand on that, inshallah? What can Muslims do to help out?
I have an easy answer. I think number one, we have to educate ourselves. Spike Lee was asked the question, what makes a great movie? He said a great movie have three ingredients. Number one, it's educational, it's inspirational, and it's entertaining. And I'm going to recommend two movies. I know none of you ever go to movies ever in your life, but I'm going to recommend two movies. One of them came out. One of them came out in 19.
I'm sorry.
Stop it. Mustafa, stop it. The first one came out in 1956. It's called 12 Angry Men, 1956, a great movie. And all of it took place in a deliberation room. 12 jurors. They didn't even have names. They had numbers. Juror number 1, number 2, number 3. And there is an inner city youth on trial for committing murder. And from the beginning of the movie, all 12 jurors, all white men, all of them like, he's guilty. We don't even have to deliberate. And one of them, one juror, had some doubt. And that's the basis of the movie, 12 Angry Men. The second one came out last year. It's a must-see. And I'm going to see if any of you saw it. Imam Khalid, I'm sure you saw it. Mustafa, I'm sure you saw it. But it's called Just Mercy.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you see it,
yes.
Absolutely. Mustafa,
Absolutely.
did you see it?
No, I didn't see that. I did not.
You didn't see it?
I didn't.
You have to do it.
Inshallah.
You have to see it. Azim?
I just wrote it down.
I have not seen that either. Imam, I don't watch movies like you said.
I got you. Okay, good. No problem. No problem. Then you talk to Imam Khalid. He explained to you the movie, right? But the point is, it's historical. If you really want to learn something about the struggle of Black people, you go see that movie, Just Mercy. It is a very powerful movie, and these are the things that educate us. So the first thing we have to do, educate ourselves. And what I would do, I would go to people like Imam Khalid and Imam Mustafa and others, go to the African American, visit for the first time other African American masjids and sit down and be educated. And then ask the question, well, what can we do? What do you suggest that we can do? There's a million things you can do. You can even donate money. So there's a lot of things you can do. You can write articles, whatever the case may be, and you can educate other Muslims. So that's my general recommendation.
Yeah, I think those are great recommendations. I think that the Muslim community has to refrain from pulling the Columbus thing on the Black community and acting like since we know now that something is going on, we have discovered something nobody else has seen or discovered before. I mean, this ain't a Columbus moment for the Muslim community. It's a time, as Imam Siraj is saying, it's a time for the Muslim community to recognize the leadership in the African-American Muslim community, even recognize the leadership in the general social justice movement, African Americans in the social justice movement, not try to supplant them in what they're doing now that the Columbus has come here and discovered something, but to find out from them, what do you think we can best do, but also try to formulate ourselves the best thing to do. There's some very basic things that we can do. If Muslims have access to resources, and resources are what are needed in order to further certain kinds of movements and certain kinds of efforts, then put those resources in a responsible way, but put those resources at the disposal of Muslim or non-Muslim, but in this context, I'll say the Muslims in the African-American community who are doing certain work or trying to do certain work, but they don't have the funds and resources available to them to carry this kind of thing out. You know, back in the civil rights days, and Imam Siraj, I read about this in books. Now, I wasn't even born in the civil rights. And look, I had to read about this. but during the civil rights movement, that part of the Black freedom struggle in this country, it was amazing. We found out the number of people who were lending financial support to organizations that they wouldn't be around otherwise, even the Nation of Islam, even like Black Panther Party. A number of these efforts during that Black freedom struggle, I mean, you had movie stars, you had all kinds of folks who were lending their names for support, they were giving money. And so I think that we have to help set up, like Imam Siraj knows, you know, everybody of importance and they know him. Let's help us set up conduits by which we can get resources and get attention to the struggles that Muslims are carrying on in the inner city communities and urban communities in particular. The communities, the big masjids we shouldn't have to go outside of our brothers and sisters in these, you know, big masajid and these big Islamic centers, because resources and monies are there. What we will struggle with to try to get $40,000 or $50,000 is much less than one fundraiser, one fundraising event where you go somewhere and $1 million literally may be raised in one fundraiser. I think we have to prioritize social justice work from the Muslim community. We have to treat it as something that's so important to our completion of our deen. If there's anything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us this deen for us to establish just societies, you know, on earth. And so it's a process of moving towards this establishment. We have to find though and create, because a lot of it doesn't exist at this point. But now that we are awakened to certain things and know that there are needs. Let me give you an example. In Dallas, Texas, I know of some efforts that is being done by brothers and sisters in ICNA, and in Houston, where Brother Mustafa is residing. I know of efforts that are going on that our brothers are doing to try to bridge resource gap, you know, not try to micromanage or tell them what they should do, but in collaboration, what do you need? What can we do? Let us plan together. Let's do this, let's do that. Now is the time to make real our commitment to equality amongst all people. I mean, it's easy for me and all of us to give a lecture about social justice in Islam. It's much harder to translate that into some practical activities, something practical. And so right now, you know, what we're doing now is you know, we're discussing important things, and it's kind of, I pray that it's motivational. But after we finish talking, the real work begins. What are we going to do? How are we going to translate this assertive role that we should be playing in the general community, especially as it relates to justice. How do we translate this from the world of words to something that's practical? And every community may have different kinds of, I mean, in general, there's very similar needs, but every community has a uniqueness about it. And so we shouldn't come with cookie cutter suggestions. Well, this is working here, this is doing there. Okay, that could be a best practice, but maybe that's not the most essential need that folks in some of these urban communities, this may not be their most essential need. So let's try to determine what the needs are and in collaboration work to devise the non-existent structures and linkages that we need to transfer resources and ideas. And it doesn't always have to be about monies and dollars and cents, but if we have that to give, we should give it up to in responsible ways.
Amen.
Can I Mustafa, you want to say something?
Amen.
Let me say this quickly. Imam Talib Abdul Rashid, he's an African-American Imam in Harlem. And he told me once that he was invited by an immigrant community, immigrant national community, for him to attend their meeting. And so what they did is they wrote on the board 10 priorities, 1 to 10. The most important priority, number 1, and the least important, number 10. So they said, Imam Talib, what do you see? What do you think about this? He said, it's interesting. What you have as priority number 1 in my community is priority number 10. And what you have as priority number 10 in my community is priority number 1. So you got to understand who you're dealing with, number 1. And to Imam Khalid's point, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, Akha Rasulullahi sallallahu sallam bayna Abdul Rahman ibn Auf wa Sa'd ibn Rabi'ah. And if you notice, the Prophet made a bond of brotherhood between the Muhajirin, who were poor, who left and gave everything, and they have nothing, with the Ansar, right? And then Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, Sa'd ibn Rabi'ah, he said, I'm the wealthiest of the Ansar. This is my wealth. Take care of it. This is the kind of really brotherhood that's real, that's not lip service, that now it manifests, as Imam Khalid is saying, now manifests in some real deliverables.
Yeah, I think we have to get beyond the lip service, and people have to step out of their comfort zones. Because it's real comfortable. I was talking to some youngsters just recently, and how comfortable they are in the suburbs, and that they don't know the history of the genocide of the Native Americans. They don't know the history of the enslavement of the African Americans. They don't even know the history of the state that they're in. And I said, this is not sustainable in the long term. You will become frivolous in the end. Education is key, and you have to start that conversation with folks, like with African Americans, actually. You got to start the conversation with African Americans to understand. Outside of that, there's no relationship. You're just sitting in the suburbs, chilling, eating whatever you eat, and having a nice time. And I told him, I said, this is unacceptable right now. You're Muslims. Do you not understand your religion? Do you not understand what you're supposed to be doing? So I just kind of left them with a message. Do something outside of your comfort zone. Change something. Allah knows best.
Thank you.
Jazakumullah khairan, Imams. SubhanAllah, I think education is a big portion that we are missing, especially in the Muslim community over here. Never mind even the youth of the Muslim community here, but even our fathers and our grandparents who migrated here. They definitely do not have it. And SubhanAllah, our history books don't do it any justice either. They have a very small print for things that you can write huge textbooks about just themselves. So inshallah, this is the point with the series that we have going on right now, is we're hoping that all of the viewers that do come here leave with something more than they came with. Leave with something to think about. Leave with even more questions, because questions beget knowledge. And the more questions we ask, the better this is going to settle into our heart, inshallah. So Imams, I do want to move forward. I've been asking a lot of the questions, and I want to open it up into the audience. Alhamdulillah, we have a few questions now, and I'll ask the first one. We see, especially on social media, that even in the African American community, whenever we're speaking about something like this, you have imams that are speaking kind of in not in parallel to the movement. Some are saying that this is something that is normal. This is something that is not something that should equate to a movement like this. Others are saying, and the vast majority are saying that, listen, this is systemic racism. This is something that we cannot continue to ignore. So a question we had from one of our viewers is, what African American leadership should the American Muslims follow?
Wow.
So again, Imam, I just want to also preface, I'm going to ask a lot of questions here that might not be indicative of the more the people that are educated about the movement and the systemic racism and know exactly what is happening right now and what side they need to be on. But this is coming from the mindset of somebody who is not only sincerely asking, we hope they're sincerely asking, but also somebody who needs this education as well.
I think one thing is important, and that is don't necessarily look for one or two national African American leaders that you hitch your wagon to. All politics are local, and so what we need to do, if we don't already in our community, we need to identify African American leaders in our local communities who are doing something, and with this caveat, to understand that as important as electoral politics may be, it's not the end all of everything. And so, not sometimes what I've seen in moving around the country a little bit, I've seen that we embrace the idea, the philosophy even, that everything can be solved through the ballot box. And so I'm not saying the ballot box is not important, but there are many, let me put it like this. Every significant social change legislation in this country has come about through struggle. It's come about through people on the streets demanding certain things, whether we're talking about anti-war efforts, whether we're talking about civil rights, whether we're talking about voting rights, whatever it is, it comes first from the grassroots. It's not coming from the top down. Even when Barack Obama was elected president in 2008 for his first term, he said to a group of African American leaders, make me do something. And what was inferred in this was not, I'm the big bad president, you think you're so bad, make me do something. What he was saying is his understanding, coming from a background of being a community organizer, he understood the role of a grassroots bottom-up demand and organized demands coming from the grassroots and bottom up. So he was telling these Black leaders, they saying, well, we need this, we need that. He said, okay, well, make me do it. Organize the demand for it. Be loud enough, be aggressive enough, be just organized enough to force me as president of the United States to take some kind of action. And so I think we have to understand that. And so Barack Obama, started his, ascendancy that ended in the presidency, if we can call it ascendancy, but his rise in stature as a community organizer. And till this day, he talks about, he assists those who are in this effort. So we as Muslims, I think, we have to look at these, this grassroots stuff. Just don't think that voting is going to be the only avenue for change in this country.
Right. Can I make a recommendation? And everywhere I've gone, I have expressed this opinion. I think it's important to express it now. The Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, said something very heavy, very deep, and we should consider. And we quote it all the time, but do we get it? خير أمتي قرني ثم الذين يلونهم The best of my ummah is my generation. And then the generation that follows it, and then the generation that follows it. Let's take a look at his generation. He's making a point. And I'm going to, two things that I notice about his generation, two things. And the first one I mentioned, a lot of Muslims, they get upset when I say it. And I'm going to say it now. And even though you want to jump on me, you're going to get on me, but I'm going to say it anyway. The entire community, that first generation, almost all of them were converts. Almost all of them were converts. When I go to a Muslim community, I look to see, is there any interaction with the non-Muslims? That's you name that first generation. Look at this hadith. Anna Aisha radiallahu anha, al-Mu'mineen, Ummi Abdullah. From Aisha, the mother of the faithful. Why is she called the mother? Because Allah said in Quran, and the wives of the prophets are your mothers, right? Mother of the believers, mother of Abdullah. What? Who's Abdullah? She didn't have no children. How come she's the mother of Abdullah? You know what Abdullah was? Abdullah was her nephew, the son of her daughter Asma. Abdullah, as Zubair, was the first Muslim baby born in the Ummah. Everyone else was convert. You name them. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. Name all of them. They came into Islam. So there's always an interaction. Even those who were enemies to Islam, they became Muslims. So the first thing I'm saying to that brother, don't wait now and say, well, who the leaders among the African Americans? Don't worry about that. But let us start having interrelationship and talk to people like Imam Khalid and Brother Mustafa to learn who should we work with. Work with your local masjid. Okay, number one. Number two, if you study that ideal ummah 1400 years ago, many of them youth, young people, extraordinarily young. If you look at the 7 most prolific narrators of hadith, all of them young. Some of them became Muslim at the age of 7 and 10. Young, right? So when I go to a masjid, where are you? Who are you? How dare you? You talk about some movement. There's no movement, man. You ain't got no youth. I did a program for a masjid in Detroit. They said the oldest masjid. And that name, oldest masjid, have 2 meanings. Number one, it's the first masjid. And that masjid was the first masjid in Detroit. Number 2, it means literally old people. That masjid is called the geriatric masjid. And the average age of the Muslims in that masjid is 80 years old. What are you? What are you? What are you? So what I'm saying is that we have a different mindset. We got to go to the converts or reverts, whatever you want to call them, go to the non-Muslims and have dialogue with them, right? So when something happens, we're not caught off guard. Who are we going to talk to? Same people you've been talking to.
Hey, Mustafa, can you allow me to say something real quick, please? Sure. Brother Azim, I wanted to mention that we should not sleep on the Poor People's Campaign under the leadership of Reverend William Barber.
Yeah.
This is a fusion movement. I mean, I've been participating from the very beginning at these Moral Monday events. It is a movement that has a principled leadership. William Barber, there's some people who feel that he's like as far as just a non-Muslim African-American leader, he's like a second coming in a way of Martin Luther King Jr. Now that's a big thing to say. But in my experience in dealing with African-American non-Muslim leaders across the country over the years, to me, he is a sincere guy that the community is not going to have to worry about being bought off or scared off and this kind of thing. He's not, reckless and and all this other kind of stuff. So I'm just saying, I'm not trying to say he's the leader of the Black folk and Black movement right now, but he is one of the key leaders, national leaders, who has, and I saw it happening, he has helped along with others to build a grassroots movement all across this country. And if you haven't seen the digital platform with the Poor People's Campaign, there was supposed to be a march on a campaign going to Washington yesterday. It was on a digital platform. If you take the time, go to Poor People's Campaign, I guess it's .org or something like that. I'm sure it's going to be on their website. Look at this, and you will see and learn so much about America just through watching this one digital demonstration that was held yesterday. And so I'm saying that it's something that the Muslim community, we can access, involvement with this and learn from the African Americans. But it's not just an African American movement, not by no means. But it's to me, it's a decent movement, and I recommend that we just kind of check into it. Don't be scared off when somebody says something about, trans or, queers, this kind of thing. It's from a Muslim perspective, it's an unfortunate reality of the society in which we live. Their rights have been translated into civil rights now. And so, they call it civil rights, and they're pushing forth things with that. Focus on the good in anything that, that we're trying to be involved with. If it's so egregious overall, we can't deal with it, don't deal with it. But I'm sort of warning you in advance. They're talking about rights for everybody.
Yeah,
I agree with you, man.
The point is that moral compass that we have to focus on.
Right.
Reverend Barber, perfect example of that moral compass. There's some people you may not want to get involved with. Just be blank. But the moral compass and people that and have the put forth by the community as decent people, then those are the people you want to talk to. That moral compass is very important.
Yep.
Absolutely. Jazakumullah khairan, Imams. I want to take one last question from the audience. And I know we talked about it a little bit, but it's coming up again. That's why I think we should spend maybe a little bit more time on it. And just briefly, because I know this is a huge topic that we could, spend program after program on. But somebody asked, can you explain systemic racism more clearly? And I want us to, I heard this question coming from a discussion that I was having with somebody else, an immigrant. He said, what are you talking about racism? What are you talking about systemic racism? I came to this country with no money in my pocket, and look where I am right now. So why can't everybody else do exactly what I did? You know what I mean? And subhanAllah, like this is not a question that's often broadcasted, but in certain circles, you'll hear this question. Maybe in your family, maybe you have that uncle who is, very, very, very racist, but he doesn't know that he's racist, so he doesn't think that it's racist because it's been so ingrained in him to believe what he believes. So inshallah, if we could answer that question.
Yeah. Imam Khalid for sure. For sure. Imam Khalid for sure.
No, I'm a cheerleader right now. Go ahead.
This systemic racism is just a manifestation of how racism is embedded in every aspect of the society. In every institution of American society, you have racism ingrained in it, whether we're talking about the educational system, whether we're talking about just financial, the opportunities to advance financially. Let me give you an example that I think a number of our immigrant brothers, a simple example, should be able to understand. When folks come outside of the United States and immigrate to the United States, including folks from the Muslim community, when they come and if they don't already have money already saved up when they come here, if they want to, one of the first things that is offered, if they're business people, are low interest business loans and sometimes even grants to help them set up businesses from the time they hit the shores. You let an African American, who, no matter how great the business idea may be, no matter what their track record has been for making so much money for corporate America, let them now say that they want to establish their own businesses and see what kind of loans or grants that become available to them. So the point I'm trying to make is that even folks who are recently coming into the country are not blocked by these expressions of systemic racism that Black folks in this country have historically and up to this day be blocked from. Just like the issue in education, you know, as an example. In public school education, this is, to me, it's almost kind of criminal. It creates a permanent inequality in the public schools, where you have in most places in this country that the resources that go to these community schools, public schools and neighborhoods are based on the tax base of that area. So if you have a low income housing area and you have a school in that particular area, then the resources are going to be so much more limited and that they have available to them than those who are coming from the schools established in more affluent neighborhoods because of the tax base and because of the parents putting the kids to those schools. I've worked in the public school system here for 13 years, and it is horrendous. It's the way that it's set up. You can never, ever catch up with the quality of these schools based on the tax base from these areas. The Black community, it'll be another 100 years before you could have those kind of schools in these urban areas and in more low-income areas. It doesn't have to be, you know, poor neighborhoods, but just, you know, they don't have the resources in the joint family incomes that they have, say, in some of these white schools. You know, so that's an area. It's an expression of systemic racism in every area. You know, even, you know, what was so, you know, horrible years ago when there was so much debate about affirmative action and using, you know, what they were calling affirmative action to try to make up from some of the past injustices of Black folks and others, minorities, being denied access to certain things. And then everybody jumped up in arms. Well, these people, how are they getting all this stuff? They don't deserve it.
Right.
What the heck, you know, are you talking about? It's our labor that for literally 400 years built the wealth of this nation. And now we start on a race, you know, it's a mile race, and we're half a mile behind. And you put bricks on our back and say, now the gun go off, and everybody, you supposed to be able to compete with those who had the benefit of 400 years of free labor, land grants, just, okay, y'all white folks, yes, we settle America, whatever the eye can see, that'll be yours. All we ask of you is to just go settle it. So I'm still waiting for my family to get our 40 acres in Omu, which was promised to liberated African Americans who were coming as enslaved people. We were set free and say, after all these years of enslavement, and say, okay, you're free, now go ahead. Now, what kind of freedom is that? Where am I supposed to live? How am I supposed to, where's my family gonna live? You know, it was a perfect setup to create slavery in another name. So there's nothing equal about how African people of African descent have been dealt with in this country. So it's shameful to me. And I've heard it so many times. I've been asked the question by well-meaning immigrant brothers, the very same question that you were asked. I came here with nothing. My granddaddy came here with nothing in his pocket, and look what they're doing now, right? If you understood the history of this nation and this relationship to people of African descent, you would be ashamed to even articulate something like that, because you would know the past inequities that have come to the present that to this day, and I'm not giving an excuse for anybody being lazy, but I'm just saying all things being equal, we know in the Black community, it's an axiom. It's something that we take for granted. It's something that my mother told me and my sisters. It's something that we understand. If you want to get ahead in America as an African American, you have to be at least twice more qualified to be able to compete for the same job. You have to have much more education. You got to go get at least a master's, and you're competing with other folks who have a high school diploma. But oftentimes your masters don't mean nothing because of systemic racism. And it may not be the best example, but it's every aspect of the society. It's something that started with the birth of the nation, and it has continued. And so this is why I believe we're in such an important moment in the history of this country right now, because folks are starting to demand changes. I've heard the more systemic and institutional and structural racism in the last 2 weeks, brothers, than I've heard in the last 20 years. And not just coming from Black folks. Folks
Right.
want. And so we need to be educated. We need to help educate our kids. And the next thing I'm going to say, one thing has to be done, in my opinion, in every Muslim school across the country, we have to start including the history of Muslims in this country, the history of African American enslaved people, the ones who were enslaved and came to this country, and those so many maintained their Islam throughout their lives in this country. That is a history that all of Muslims need to embrace as our own history. Those of us, the 3 African Americans sitting here, we embrace the history of Al-Andalus. We claim it as part of our history as Muslims. We embrace the history of the subcontinent. We embrace the history of Turkey. Now, if we want to start purging ourselves of some of that silent, creeping type racist attitudes, now Muslims in this country have to start embracing the history that preceded their coming to this country, that was established by people of African descent who were Muslim when they were brought here, and established the descendants of these African Muslim people.
Jazakallah khairan, Imam.
Imam.
Imam Siraj and Brother Mustafa, would you guys like to add? We do have a few minutes remaining.
Just the uncle who says that they don't recognize racism and they've done well from coming here, they've played right into the narrative. They play right into the narrative. Racism is so systematic, so sealed that they don't see any problem, but they need to look at the social indicators. Socially, politically, economically, Black people are at the bottom, always have been. And all they need to do is look a little closer to see why they have succeeded and why they can say what they say. It's disingenuous on their part because you have made it, there's nothing wrong now. What kind of thinking is that?
Yeah.
What kind of thinking is that?
I get it. You know, honestly, it's education. That's all it is. But I will tell you this though. You know who get it? It's the children. It's the children of the immigrants. They get it. I have a million cases, right? Young Muslim come to me, say, Imam, I want to marry that African American, but my parents won't let me. They're good. And I tell you this, there's something interesting in the Quran. It's also in the Bible. When Musa told his people to go fight, they said, "Fadhhab anta wa rabbuka faqatillah." You and your Lord, you fight. We sit there. And because they refused to fight, Allah made them wander for 40 years. 40 years. You know what happened? And after 40 years, that generation died. That generation died out. So if you don't get it, if you don't get the message, that's just where it is. You'll die out. And hopefully our youngsters, they will get it, inshallah. It's education. We try our best to educate ourselves. That's all.
Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khairan, Imams. Jazakumullah khairan, Imam Khalid, Imam Siraj, and Brother Mustafa White. It was truly an honor for me to host you guys over here, and I'm hoping that the viewers took a lot away from this program. SubhanAllah, just me, I have a whole page full of notes. Forgive me if I ever looked away from the screen, you know, because I want to do my part. I want to make sure that I don't just come here and host a program and then walk away and then, you know, get on with my daily duties. And for the viewers watching, inshallah, I hope that you will educate yourself. I hope that this program was beneficial for all of you, and I hope that you're going to use this to activate that courage in your heart. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out injustice and calls out those who stand against it as those that we want to be with, that we want to be for, that we want to have as our role models. So I pray, insha'Allah ta'ala, that we will remember that Allah is the provider and that everything we do that pleases Allah, Allah will give us more, insha'Allah ta'ala. And then I do just want to request Imam Siraj, if we can finish off with a dua, and then just a reminder to all of our viewers that this is a series. So if you did miss this, I believe it is recorded and you can rewatch it, inshallah, afterwards. And then we'll see you at our next series. Imam Siraj, inshallah, if you can close with the dua. Jazakumullah khairan.
I just say this. I'm going to say this one word, and then we make dua. Allah says in Quran, "Fadhkuruni adhkurkum." Remember me, and I will remember you. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this setting that we just set together for His pleasure. May Allah accept it from us. May Allah accept us, the future of the Muslims in this country, for us to work together for all that is good, all righteousness, and all justice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of us. Ameen.
Ameen.
Jazakumullah khairan, Imam Siraj. Jazakumullah khairan, Imam Khalid, and Brother Mustafa White. Inshallah, I hope this was beneficial to our viewers. Inshallah, until next time, Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiru wa natubu ilayk. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. Jazakumullah khairan for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.